the first song.
Oh, I have.
Lover of leaving?
Am I gonna get, I have two musicians
Lover
here. Am I
of
gonna get,
leaving.
oh, here comes Dan Nelson. All right, I'll wait. We've been waiting for you. Thanks for coming.
Dan.
We waited just for you.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, guys. Excellent.
I'd like to welcome you. Oh, that's right. Thank you, John. Talking stick. There, you even turned it on. That's pretty good, eh? I'm so talented. I'd like to welcome you to the Nelson Unitarian Spiritual Center. Thanks for coming this morning, you guys. And we're going to have, are we doing this? That's what I forget. Okay. And today, actually today is kind of a special day. We're going to have a joining ceremony for some of the members, which is, pardon? New members, thank you. And it should be interesting. And we're having a talk on Martin Luther King. So we're going to have the chalice lit first by our beloved John Gahn.
This is a little light in the light of the world, but this little light of mine, I'm gonna make it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna make it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna make it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. In the darkest time. In the darkest time, I'm gonna let it shine. In the darkest time, I'm gonna let it shine. In the darkest time, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
We'll do the new member ceremony first.
Alrighty. So are we going to do our song?
Yeah, well, we did a song.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So it is sort of a special day. We had a joining ceremony in October where we had our minister from New Westminster, Deb Thorne, come, and some of you were here for that. But not everyone was here. And typically in a Unitarian congregation, 2-3 times a year, new people show up and they do a joining ceremony where you sign a membership book and become a member. So we're going to do that today, and it's sort of our next joining ceremony in our progression. So folks that want to join and become a member, I think you've identified yourself. Maybe you can come up to the front here, and we're going to do a little ceremony with that.
Bring your coffee.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah, please. Only if you're cute and adorable.
You have to sit back down.
No, you definitely.
And maybe everyone else can stand if you don't mind.
And are we going to pass these out?
If you have enough for those.
Yeah, I
Sure,
do.
pass those on.
All right.
Want you to be here now, Mike. We'll have you in a minute, in the circle.
We have ceremonies on here. Did you get one? No. Is there enough? Yeah, okay.
So why don't you three come in the middle of the circle, please? Just around, you're sort of in the inner circle
They
now,
need to have.
around this.
Oh.
Yeah, and they need a
You
sheet.
need a sheet.
Here, Phil, I got an extra.
Oh, okay, great.
Maybe we could share.
No, we can share this one.
No, we have another one here. We have another one here. Is everybody?
we can share.
Okay.
We're good. Go.
All right. So, sorry, I need glasses. All right. At our Nelson Unitarian Spiritual Center, we celebrate an ever-growing diversity of spiritual sentiment and human perspective, growing from the roots of the Unitarian tradition throughout the world. Now, everybody please read the next line.
Love
Love
is
is
our
our
doctrine. We quest for truth.
We move our hearts in service to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, so all souls grow in harmony with the divine. Thus we do covenant with each other. Unitarianism is a covenant tradition. We promise mutual trust and support, and we invite our newest members to join us. So this is just the new members, say this next line, please. We come
from the diversity of being human. We come to mutual trust and support of friends, that we will be heard and our participation welcomed. We bring our talents, our gifts, our wisdom, and sharing.
Do we open our circle to these dear ones? Okay.
We open and receive you warmly,
promising mutual trust and support, guarding your dignity and worth as our own.
With gratitude, we join this circle and let our light shine.
Maybe
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome. So back to your spot.
Seeking true, authentic connection through heart, mind, and spirit, we belong. Committed in affirming principles, drawing wisdom from many sources, we belong. To share the moments of our lives, the joys and sorrows, the doubts and insights, we belong. To celebrate the spectrum of human experience, we belong. To explore all the known and unknown mysteries of our human existence. Member and friend in this circle of love and respect, we belong.
And so welcome new members. And just inside the flyer on the inside front page is the universal tradition and our 7 principles, which are worth having a look at for anyone considering joining.
Or just a reminder.
So where's the reminder?
Yeah. And now I would like to invite anyone with a joy or a blessing. And we'd like you to just have just a thought of something that you may want to be sharing, whether it's something that's wonderful or something that you would like someone to help you support you in. And make it short and sweet and
Say your name.
and say your name. And I'm going to hand you a candle and a microphone. So. And we try and keep the candle over the table so we don't get wax on the floor.
I'm Marcia, and I would like to light a candle of celebration and thanks to Lee Reed, who had an amazing gathering at her house where we watched part of a course that she is taking with Terrence Reel and Michael Kimmel. having a conversation about masculinities in today's world and the challenges and hopes. One is a therapist, the other is a sociologist who has written many books about masculinity, which I used in my dissertation. And so it was a pleasure to be there and to have the gift that we were given.
How about the rhubarb pie?
And the rhubarb pie was fabulous.
The crust was amazing.
I'm Anne, and I'd like to light a candle in thanks to each of our new members today. And thank you for joining us, and we pray for you, and know that you'll be blessed as we will too.
I'm Karen, and I'm lighting a candle for Martin Luther King Jr. Where would we be without him?
Okay.
I am lighting this candle for all the folks in positions of power and authority who took the opportunity to stand up and be counted in response to the racist remarks of the President of the United States. And I've been reading them online, and I am very thankful that some people at least are standing up and saying quite loudly that that is not who we as a people are in Canada or the United States or anywhere in the world.
Okay, absolutely.
Remind me if I drip on the floor. Try to be a good girl here. Hello, I'm Lee, and I have what I hope is a quick story for you. My candle is in gratitude for the kind of spirit that will travel 3,000 miles to be with someone in the dark. And I believe this is also a comment about probably Unitarianism, sense of service and humanity and care. About a week ago, an old man of 82 got ready to make a 3,000-mile trek across the continent in the winter, driving to Florida. And when I mentioned that, now this is Mike Freund, a Unitarian member, you probably thought he was going for the palm trees, maybe that ice storm, but the oranges. Well, he wasn't. He was driving to be with Maria. So on the other side of the continent, there's Maria, a senior, probably in her late 70s, who's just gone through her third bout of cancer. This one is lung, the other was breast, and I don't know what the one before that was. She's a retired college teacher, very cultured, very funny, has a big support network. But Michael and Maria have known each other since they were children. So a week ago, Michael buckled his dog into what they call a thunder coat. The dog hates traveling and looked at Michael like, yeah, right, thanks a lot, boss. And a thunder coat is supposed to keep an animal feeling safe and secure, and they set off on a 6-day journey. Now, I believe that Michael arrived at Maria's doorstep yesterday. And so this is gratitude for that quality of courage, of willingness to go far beyond the comfort zone, to connect with someone whom, in truth, with any senior you may never see again. One never knows. And the travel through the dark, whatever that means in terms of reaching out, I think is extraordinary. So thank you, Michael. And I think belonging to the Unitarian service movement is very important for feeding the spirit of seniors to do this kind of thing.
Well, I'm going to light one last candle. And this is for all those thoughts, all those happenings that are that we are keeping with ourselves and or not yet speech right. So, thank you. And now we have Michael.
With a drum roll.
With a drum roll.
Just gonna do our meditation, and prior to that, I'm gonna play a poem from one of my favorite authors, artists, Mary Oliver. She's an American and has written some amazing poetry. And the poem I've chosen is called The Summer Day, which I thought was appropriate in the middle of winter. So I'll just play that. It's about 1.5 minutes, and just listen, and then we'll have some silence. So get comfortable, and get comfortable in a way that you can hear what Mary Oliver, and we're going to hear it in Mary Oliver's words, which is kind of cool too. It's like having the poet right here, and so you get the enunciation that she intended when she wrote it. So we'll listen to that, and then I'll stop it, and we'll have about 1 minute or two of silent time together to meditate on what we've heard.
The summer day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who was moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Wonderful, wonderful words. And we're going to get more words from Michael Dailly. Michael Dailly is, I don't have your bio, Michael. If anyone doesn't know, but Michael Dailly is on the council, and there, actually, I didn't think about that, I could have pulled it up, but whatever. If anybody wants to know more about Michael Dailly, they can talk to him. Yes.
I think that some amazing things about Michael happened in Ontario.
Ontario.
Yes.
All right, you can do the bio.
Hi, Michael. I honor Michael for all of the work that he has done in contributing to community and contributing to causes that are really important. He has been on the board of the Down syndrome national group or provincial group in Ontario. He was a firefighter for 30 years and was also, I believe, a fire chief. Was that not true? Captain in Toronto. And the lessons he learned there inform his notions. As you can see, two very different kinds of contribution in terms of his social contribution and his work and social contribution. And I really welcome him here in our Unitarian group, where he has been active in helping this group move into Unitarian reality.
Thanks, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia.
You know, I looked at the paper this week and I saw Michael Dailly's a speaker. And, you know, we kind of like make it we kind of like to highlight who's coming to speak to get people to come and you know, it's nice to do that. But I also think it's important, the message, you know, and that everyone has a message. And everyone has a bio and has been places and done things. So I just want you to know that I feel honored to be here and be able to speak, but I also know that any one of you could come and do this and participate and share. And in fact, today's topic, I picked Martin Luther King to speak about because I know in many Unitarian congregations in the United States, they will be talking about Martin Luther King, and certainly Martin Luther King and the impact he had was far broader in the United States than in Canada, and I'll mention that. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of Martin Luther King. It's his birthday, it would have been his birthday tomorrow. He would have been 89 years old. So let me just begin. So that was the piece, and the other is that, you know, everyone's welcome. I'm no expert on Martin Luther King or history or presenting or anything, but I think it's important that we remember. And so I see my role here is just sharing that we all participate in. So unfortunately, I do have his speeches are everyone did anyone meet Martin Luther King?
John.
Oh, John, excellent. John, where was that?
That was at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington D.C. when he gave the I Have a
You were
Dream
there?
speech. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And just to set the stage, it was a very scary time because there were all kinds of reports that there was going to be an attack, but the people showed up in such droves that there was no reason for that.
Well, John, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that, and thanks for doing it at a young age,
Yeah.
in the 60s,
Yeah.
going and doing that, you know.
Yeah.
It is about the numbers and being there. That's something special.
I heard later the situation was that Martin was into his speech and it was okay, but it wasn't really driving ahead. And he'd given this speech in Philadelphia a couple weeks before, and Mahalia Jackson had heard it then. And so she tugged on his coat and said, "Give him the dream speech, Martin, give him the dream." And then, "I have a dream." And it came just like that.
Isn't that great? So everyone knows who Martin Luther King is, have heard of him. So let me just give a little background story on how I see him, because this talk is about him and his message and how it fits for us as Canadians and the world. And let's see where he fits in the continuum. So I'll start with a story about the middle of the 19th century, 1850s. A frenzy of support for Mexican-American War swept the United States, but a small minority were unhappy. They saw the war as an act of violent aggression against weak neighboring country, Mexico, who were the people in this majority that resisted this Mexican-American war. Mostly ministers, scholars, abolitionists, and a few people in government, such as Abraham Lincoln, who was not yet president, but a freshman congressman from Illinois. He called the war immoral, a serious threat to our nation's values of freedom and liberty. It's interesting when I did this research and thinking about this, how history kind of seems to repeat itself, and just different topics, but keep that in mind. A man named Henry David Thoreau also thought the war was wrong. He refused to pay taxes to the American government because of it. However, it was illegal to refuse to pay taxes, which are owed to the government. Thoreau was arrested and thrown in jail. Thoreau sat in jail rather than pay taxes and a fine to get out. He did this to make a public statement. I refuse to support the war, Thoreau's friend, the Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, came to visit him in jail. Emerson asked why Thoreau was allowing himself to waste away in jail when he had the money to pay the taxes. Thoreau responded with a challenge to his friend. He said, "The question is not what I'm doing in here, but what are you doing out there?" To Thoreau's frustration, his tax was paid by a relative who also could not tolerate his imprisonment, and he was promptly released from captivity. However, the experience led him to write the groundbreaking essay, Civil Disobedience, which eloquently explains why it is necessary to disobey a law when the law is unjust. And it's easy to find that if you're interested in it. It's usually in the back of anything he writes. It's always there. 60 years later, on the other side of the world, in South Africa, a British-educated lawyer named
Mahatma Gandhi.
Mohandas K.
Gandhi got a job. Although allowed to work as a lawyer, Gandhi discovered that he lacked full rights in South Africa, whose laws treated all Indians as second-class people and black Africans, the majority of the population, much worse. Gandhi, like Thoreau, was arrested for nonviolent protests against unjust laws. Gandhi read Thoreau's essay, Civil Disobedience. It inspired him to not give up, even when the challenge seemed much too high to overcome. Gandhi dedicated his entire life to the principles of nonviolence and civil disobedience for social change. In India, his peaceful leadership encouraged the Indian people to protest and persist until their country won its independence from British rule. Near the time of Gandhi's death in 1948, back in the United States, a young minister named Martin Luther King Jr. began his own nonviolent fight. America's government was supposed to protect our citizens and rights and opportunities, but in many places, in many ways, government specifically denied rights and opportunities to African Americans. Laws needed to change. Many people were angry. Some wanted to see change through violence. Dr. King spoke passionately about making change by peaceful means. He joined nonviolent marches and demonstrations to show others how. People listened and watched. The more people followed Dr. King's words and his example, the more powerful grew the peaceful demand. They're pretty outspoken about bringing to attention to the issues of social injustice in the United States. I'll go through a bit more story on Martin Luther. Is okay, my reading's okay, and you're okay? So let me give you a little second story with Martin Luther, and then I'll bring back to how Unitarians fit into this and where we can go from here. In February 1965, the United States was at a turning point in the civil rights movement. What year were you at the bar?
63.
63. The Civil Rights Act had been passed in 64, but critical rights were not legally secured for African Americans. Black men and women routinely faced physical violence, biased literary tests, and other obstacles when they attempted to register to vote. In Selma, Alabama, African Americans' attempts to register had been met with an injunction by local judges forbidding groups of 2 or more to talk about civil rights. Organizations such as Southern Christian Leadership Coalition, led by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and including James Bevel, had begun to work on voter registration campaigns and protests in response to this. On February 18th, during a protest in nearby Marion, 26-year-old Baptist deacon Jamie Lee Jackson was shot by police as he tried to protect his grandfather from their beating. 8 days later, Jackson died of his wounds. Surrounding communities erupted in grief and anger, and James Bevel called for a march to Montgomery, the capital of Alabama, to protest police violence and demand voting rights from Governor George Wallace. So on the first march, more than 500 people showed up to march the 54 miles to Montgomery on March 7, 1965. As they approached the Edmund Pettus Bridge just outside Selma, state troopers arrived on the order of Governor Wallace and told the marchers, "Turn back." When the marchers refused, troopers attacked with nightsticks, tear gas, while mounted divisions charged into the crowd on horseback. Imagine. Televised images of the encounter shocked the nation. 17 marchers were hospitalized, and that day became known as Bloody Sunday. Dr. King immediately called for a second march, issuing a call to clergy and others around the country to participate. One who responded was Unitarian Universalist Reverend James Reeb. Another religious leader who answered the call was conservative Jewish Rabbi Abraham Joshua Herschel, who had escaped the Holocaust just before World War II and was a longtime ally of the civil rights movement. On March 9th, 500 people were present to repeat the march, but again, they only reached Edmund Pettus Bridge. A judge has temporarily forbidden marching until the state trooper's roll could be examined in court, and the organizers decide to temporarily obey. The marchers return to Selma to prepare for a third attempt. They're just not going to give up. That night, Reverend Reeb and Unitarian Universalist minister Clark Olson and Orloff Miller had dinner at an integrated restaurant, one that welcomed both blacks and whites. As they were leaving, they were easily identified as outsiders, and therefore civil rights marchers, by some angry local men who attacked the ministers with clubs. Reverend James Reeb's skull was cracked, and he died. The death of a white man brought a level of national outrage among other whites that Jimmy Lee Jackson's death had not inspired. Protests were held around the country in response to the death, the march, and years of pressure. President Lyndon Johnson introduced the Voting Rights Act to Congress on March 15, 1965. The march, however, was still left to be completed. On the 21st of March, tens of thousands set forth for Selma for a 5-day, 4-night trek to the state capitol. Rabbi Herschel, Reverend King led the march, linked arm in arm. Herschel would later say that when they walked, it was as if his legs were praying. When the highway became thinner, some marchers walked through while others were transported by volunteer drivers, including Unitarian Universalist Viola Lizu. Lizu was a white woman, a mother of 5, a new member of the Unitarian Universalist movement, and a resident of Detroit. She was also someone who believed that racism in the United States was unacceptable. When she heard the call for volunteers, she went. The night of that final march, Viola was driving an African-American activist to Montgomery when a car full of Ku Klux Klan members started following them and shouting threats. The Ku Klux Klan, everyone knows who they are, hateful group, still exists today, targeting blacks, Jews, immigrants, homosexuals, and others. She sang freedom songs in response. Miles later, on a lonely stretch of road, the KK members pulled up and shot Viola through the window, killing her. Her death brought a fresh wave of outrage. National response grew as televised broadcasts showed the marchers' determination and the power of Dr. King's speech. When the marchers arrived in Montgomery just months later, the Voting Rights Act passed into law. Christians, Jews, Unitarian Universalists, and others who worked together to march from Selma to Montgomery had changed the country forever. It's amazing the power of, standing and saying, we need help, this needs to change, this isn't right. And someone saying, come and do that, and there's a price to pay, there's people that don't want that to happen. And yet, the persistence of people to come and join, and I also know, the call to other religions and to joining, and part of that is that we do that so that we'll understand each other. One of the things that I'm what's most attractive to coming to a Unitarian congregation is that we do welcome Muslims or people of all faiths, Buddhists, Christians, or otherwise. And if you come to a Unitarian service or go to a Unitarian service anywhere in Canada, United States, you'll see some basic guidelines for the service, but you'll not find topics anywhere else, and certainly not in other churches. We start talking about same-sex marriage that the Unitarians got involved with and have worked for in Canada, and right to life, right to choose life, or abortion rights, right to choose death and the life choices. We're involved in that now. So there's all these struggles, and typically it's people that have an interest in those things that are first on the front line. And it's interesting, even mentioning in that story, the fellow that escaped the Holocaust, and here he is in the civil rights. Like, you'd think he would have had enough of it, But what he did was he knew that I'm thinking he would have known that you need to stand up before it gets that far. That's why we do those things. I do have, I have a short, it's only a minute and a half. It's actually Martin Luther King's, I love technology. We could have Martin Luther King's voice. His last speech, and it's not the whole one because his speeches were hours. He was quite an orator. So a little piece, a minute and a half, of his last speech, the night before he was killed. And so let's have a listen to that. Okay, just give me a minute for technology here. Might need to push the button on the top of that.
This way on the top?
Yeah, push that down, in the middle. Okay. It likes to turn off, so.
I see.
Right, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Almost like he knew what was going to happen to him. When you take that piece out.
And he was down there for the garbage workers who were on strike. He's supporting that. That's why he went to Memphis.
All right.
Yeah, can I just offer one
Sure.
little short thing? If you've ever been to the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta, Georgia, they have a place there that has a recreation of the Samuel Pettit Bridge. And you walk down this long corridor and you go up the bridge. And it's only till you get to the top of the bridge, you see this frieze of all the state troopers there with their dogs and their guns and that sort of stuff. And you don't see it before you come on that. And the bridge is just half, so that's where the half was left. And so I got to do that with my son, and it was very powerful what they were up against.
I'd like to say, I would say the American Unitarian congregations, many of them will be, well, Martin Luther King Day is tomorrow, I think. And they'll be having services today, and I'm sure reflecting on that message and how do we deal with today and what's happening. And there's progress, you know, there's always the hope and progress that you're moving forward. Sometimes it looks like one step back and two forward.
Michael?
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that what's happening in the States right now and the kinds of racist remarks that have come from the president are horrifying. Particularly, it's as if his words, Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, could be said today and need to be said today in a very loud way. And people really need to stand up. And I've reposted a number of the people who have stood up on my Facebook page publicly. And I've done that even though I have a very deep fear that Trump will take anyone who has spoken out on Facebook and posted things like that, and will have them stopped at the border.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody has to stand up sometime. And so I've done that.
All right, thank you. I just want to take a couple more minutes and then we'll wrap up. And that's March 21st is United Nations declared International Day for Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And I believe that the United Nations also had a statement condemning
Yes.
Trump's words. And he's one guy. Unfortunately, he's president right now. As part of the continuing process of developing, this message is from 2004, and it's CUC, our Canadian Unitarian group, is actually separate from the United States now. At one point they were together and it was one umbrella group, but now there's a Canadian and an American. And I will plug that our Canadian conference is in Hamilton in May 18th this year. Anyone going that way? So as part of the continuing process of developing autonomy, the Canadian Unitarian Council has discerned that racism in Canada involves some different tensions than racism in the United States. U.S. racial equality work tends to focus on tensions between white majority and African American majority, although there's other tensions, I'm sure. While undoubtedly discrimination against black people in Canada, there is, but most blatant racism tends to be against Aboriginal people and immigrants. And so just identifying that as a Canadian group to say, I just speak it, you know, we need to speak that. And interesting, that's 2004, 10 years ago, we didn't even have the reconciliation that had come along. Unitarians commonly work with interfaith groups, which often include immigrant faith groups such as Buddhists, Muslims, Islamic. CUC reached out to the Islamic community, pledging friendship and support for their right to practice their religion after 9/11. You know, there was a time it was an opportunity at that time. We went, you know, we were making anyone who was from Arabic wrong. And so it was important to also say, no, that's not everyone, that's not. And so we each have a piece to do that. First step to eliminating racism is to locate and name it. Social justice work is intrinsic to Unitarianism. Encourages all congregations to analyze and combat racial discrimination in our own communities and recognize how it plays out differently in Canada and the United States. So in Canada, there's 44 congregations, Unitarian congregations, with 5,200 members arising out of work of outspoken reformers and dissenters. And it's a five-century-old tradition, Unitarian movement, and Unitarian Universalists, and flows a broad religious stream augmented by humanism, earth-centered Buddhism, and other progressive beliefs. But certainly, social justice is a big part of Unitarianism, and that's a big group. That's 5,200 of us that are speaking up, and we have asked for government standing at when there's a hearing. The CUC office is in Toronto, but they go to Ottawa regularly and ask for standing and speak about right to die legislation, and we're there with same-sex marriage and those other issues. And things are happening. Also, Universalists are no stranger to struggle. Been there for Selma to Standing Rock, and also the Women's March last year in Washington. You know, so there's lots of opportunities. In fact, you talk about with Martin Luther King and big marches on Washington, but the bigger marches were actually the Women's March last year. I think was the biggest.
That was the biggest.
Yeah, because it took place in so many different places. So, what can we do? You know, following the 2016 U.S. election, the climate of fear and hate seems to have risen, and many people are wondering how could it have happened, and then and could it happen here? And then, you know, we had a shooting in Quebec City. We can forget, but at the mosque there was a shooting that was really seemed to be a racially motivated event. So, how our faith and our commitment to justice, diversity, and inclusion should inform our response. How can we act? And so here's what's suggested from the CUC. First principle: remember our principles and sources, like Martin Luther King today. But first principle affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person, while our second calls on us to practice justice, equality, compassion, and human relations. Taken together, these principles serve as a powerful reminder that all human lives matter, including people of color, members of LGBTQ, refugees, undocumented immigrants, and many others who feel particularly at risk. So we need to be welcoming as a congregation by offering, and there's other church groups that are doing this, refugee sponsorship is a potential option for getting involved, participating in the women's marches. So we need to continue to live out those principles on this and stand for love and joining and peaceful. And it's difficult when necessary, when it comes to those whom we disagree. We've got to strive not to see those who hold opposing views as enemy, but must maintain the courage of our convictions while keeping an open mind and seeking to find common ground. So it's not about othering them and cutting them off or making them wrong. It's about engaging and having conversation, maybe peacefully standing and asking, why would you say that, think that, behave that way? Do you mind me asking? Can we have a conversation? I mean, you know, I think there's times through our day or through our week where there's an opportunity maybe for that. And, you know, whether it's women issues and that, Marcia has highly tuned to those issues, and I'm learning about it. I want to learn more about it. She knows that, and so, you know, even to tell the, you know, women in your life or men that, you know, that I'm open to having that conversation begins that conversation for me to change and grow and be able to take that somewhere else.
Attuning to our the indigenous issues right here.
Yep.
In our healthcare systems here in Nelson, Castlegar, and Trail. My great-grandson's father, who's visibly Native, he and my granddaughter made complaints against 6 different health professionals through our hospital because he was being racially profiled when he was ill in June. And they'd come back with saying that I don't know whether they're going to call it Lance's Law, around requiring all healthcare professionals to have racial, culturally sensitive training at that level. I mean, to be, told that your stomach issue is because of residential, oh, it's probably residential waters and you haven't lived on reserve for 16 years is seriously inappropriate.
Mhm. So there's still lots of places where we can begin to speak up. So working with other faith groups is suggested, so participate with other faith groups. When there's other, it doesn't have to be your initiative, when there's other initiatives we can join, when you hear the call for help to participate, it's a good idea. Sharing stories, multi-faith action on Facebook or social media, wherever you can do that. And don't lose sight of history. So the present era may seem uniquely challenging. It's important to bear in mind that it's by no means the only time in history when Unitarians or humanity have faced difficult circumstances. We survived World War II, the Cold War, and there's reason to believe we'll prevail again. So it's worth remembering that the struggle for women's rights, LGBT rights, and many other causes have rarely gone in a straight line, and setbacks have accompanied every seeming step forward. So, I mean, and they give the example of the same sex, I mentioned it before, but CUC passed a resolution in 1978 to end discrimination based on sexual orientation. It wasn't until the 90s that most provinces began to amend their laws, and now 2005 when Unitarians is when it became across the country. So things take time, and one of the sayings Martin Luther King is well known for is the moral arc of the universe is long, but it tends towards justice. Meaning that, in all our struggles, you may feel outnumbered and feel like you're going backwards, but in the long haul, with with the right intention and it's the right thing to do, there's some extra power that goes with that. So remember that you're not alone. And I just want to pass these and share with you that Unitarians are involved in the climate justice in Nelson. So even in our little town here, you mentioned there's probably other opportunities to get involved with reconciliation. If you haven't read reconciliation, there's a brief.
Do you have any more of those?
How many of these are coming around?
Right, yeah.
No, but I'll give you another one later. So what it
Yeah,
reads
you can
is
share them.
I've
Nelson
got this.
Nelson Interfaith Climate Action Collaborative is kickstarting the new year with a week of education, contemplation surrounding the issues of climate change in our environment and people. So here we have it in our own little town. There's an opportunity. Each day we hear from a speaker who will give a different take on these important issues, and then a chance to ask questions and discuss as a group. We welcome you to join in encountering climate justice, and it's free of charge. And on the list you have are all the dates and locations. And Shelley Boyd will be speaking on the Thursday. Eco Society, all week. There's different places, and we're going to be at when are we there, John?
24th.
The 24th is the Unitarian Spiritual Center. We're sponsoring an event at the United Church, and Kim Charlesworth is going to speak about food security and climate change. So it's all the little things that you can do that you are putting your foot forward, like in the march, to buy local food, to support things. So please be vigilant for what opportunities there are, and let us know. Come here, and if it's something that moves you, tell us about it. Light a candle and let us know, or we can get some more people coming. And then I'm going to be at Wen's, the Rod and Gun Club on the Sunday, and talking about, they're going to introduce all the different faith groups in Nelson, and I'll represent Unitarians. And so I thought, this is kind of neatly ties in with what, we're talking about, peaceful protest and the timeline of that and participating. So this is a call of action.
Can you, Michael, send that out to everybody?
Yeah, it'll go, John?
Yeah.
And it would be
Emails.
helpful
Can
for
send
all
it
of
to
the
him.
pieces of paper that we had today that didn't go all the way around. We could send those out too.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right. Well, one thing I have to say, and that is for longevity, I would like to commend Coretta Scott King, who did live into her senior years and was an amazing human being for education, civil rights, and things like that. And those guys are martyrs, Gandhi, and it's like fireworks. They did amazing things, but there are people with boots on the ground, shoes on the ground, that work every day. And Coretta Scott King was one of those, and we don't hear very much about her.
Yeah, and his daughter is Loretta, is it?
Is that right, Loretta? Do you know? His daughter Loretta?
I'm actually on her
Could be.
Facebook page,
Ah,
and so I
okay.
get messages from activities and events and things
Oh,
like that.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think you're right. I'm not sure, but there's another one. Why don't we all know her name?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So. Okay.
So thanks for listening, and I'm sure there's opportunity to talk about that.
Oh.
Thanks, Michael.
Where's the offering?
Yeah, we do
Pass
the
the
offering.
basket. We're going to pass the basket, and this is just help us keep the lights on, pay the rent, and we appreciate whatever you have, you feel like offering. And okay, you have words on this. I just see this. An offering collecting financial donations for the congregation or for justice work in the community. So, and then we're going to get to sing a very famous song.
Just as the basket goes around, I mean, that's, the one way is to march, the other is to contribute financially. And as we get a fund and we have a committee, social justice committee, those monies help further causes too.
Yeah.
So we'll begin to do that.
The group that we've been at has always given to, as Karen will attest, always given something to a special group. Sometimes it's been for the homeless or the women's shelter, that kind of stuff. And, we will continue to do that as the Unitarians. So,
Mention the aging before you.
oh, yes, why don't you do that?
So at the end, your announcements. Closing
Okay.
song.
Okay.
John.
You got it?
Gonna set him up?
There is a copy of We Shall Overcome
Pete Seeger coming?
in your little folder. There should be.
We're gonna have musical accompaniment by Pete Seeger.
There's a small piece of paper in your little folder. There should be anyway. And it's the words, and then Michael's gonna actually have us.
John, anytime?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay,
You gonna stand?
yeah, let's stand, as you're willing and able.
Overcome, we shall overcome, we shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe.
Everybody's voice counts.
Everybody's pretty good singers here. Oh, okay.
Okay. And just-
Okay. So, we'd like to welcome our new members, and with gratitude, we join this, let you join this circle and let our light shine. So as we transfer this light from the chalice to our hearts and let it glow all week. Okay.
Just blow.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. And we have, oh, you're gonna do it, Michael?
Well, just an announcement that after service, like in about, get a tea and meet in the back, we're gonna have our annual general meeting. So everyone's welcome, members and friends. And I'm hoping we can do it in about 20 minutes. And just a couple of items to vote on and discuss, and we'll get a report from
We
our.
could do it here.
Wanna do it
We
what
could do
time?
our AGM here.
We can do it right here?
Aren't the folks coming in?
Well, they don't have a right to be here till 1 o'clock.
Also, are there any other announcements before we forget? All right.
Hi, a number of you were able to come out to the wonderful seasonal sing-along by the Malkin Hole Choir in December. And I'd like to announce another amazing event that's happening at the Malkin Hole on January 27th, which is the Locavore Feast. We do it sometimes 2 times a year. It used to be called the 100-Mile Potluck. It's a wonderful community event where all it takes is an entry by donation and a generous potluck item made with ingredients as local as possible. Now, coffee and chocolate has always been exempt. But, dig into your freezers from anything you might have from the summer, or, go to the co-op or somewhere and see if you can get any kind of local vegetables or whatever and make up a potluck dish to bring. It's a wonderful event. This year, we've brought back the silent auction, which is a fabulous array of community contributions. It's a great time. The Locavore Feast at the Malkin Hole.
Thank you.
Everyone is.
Yeah, I would like this. I can talk into that paper. But, are there any other announcements?
I just want to announce that there's a poetry slam this evening at the John Ward Coffee Shop. It starts at 7. And there will be some really interesting people there, Ellen Burt being a friend of mine, and she is a very good writer. She'll be there, and many other local poets.
Thank you. Yeah.
So just a last note, we will meet in the back. I think it's important to keep business and this separate. And so 5 minutes, we'll start.
Okay, and I just want to,
Can I do one?
yeah, absolutely.
This is kind of in the spirit of today's tribute to Martin Luther King. Put it on your calendar on March the 4th that Carl Perrin's going to come here. He's a leading activist in the objections and environmental movements on Burnaby Mountain against the, what do you call that, the protests.
The freighters,
Yeah.
the
Not
pipeline.
The pipeline, yeah. So he'll talk to us about ways of being active. He's a great expert in that. So March the 4th, we're going to call it March Peace and the 4th.
Okay, March the 4th. All right, and I'd like to say that next week, we have our very own Michael Pratt. And do you want to very quickly say what you're going to do next week? That's okay, just tell us.
Okay, right, I just wanted to talk about coming to terms with God, what's believable, how it can
Hold it close.
how it can change our lives, and
God.
the reality as much as possible. Anyway, look forward to seeing it.
Michael always has us, everybody interacting, we all get to talk. I'm assuming you're gonna do the same. All right, great. And then the following week is Lee Reed. You wanna say a quick word?
Sure. That will be about the grace and courage that runs through the lives of Kootenai seniors. So it's stories about the grace in aging, which you all have.
Thank you. And I would like to invite you to have a cup of coffee and chat. The other thing is, I'm going to give you some logistics. The chairs with arms, you don't have to move or put away. The chairs without arms go back against that wall and around those tables. If you feel like moving them, but please don't put the chairs with arms away.
No,
Okay.
because
Because the
new
people-
people are coming in here and they like the chairs.
In fact, we have people
They're
already
out
waiting.
there and waiting now.
And the 3 new members, maybe come on up and we'll do the sign thing. signing.
Oh, okay, great.
Michael?
Anything else I forgot?
At the AGM.
And like I said, there's cookies and coffees and
Yeah.
AGM in 10 minutes, 5 minutes. All right, thank you for coming.
And Michael, you can
Is it okay if I take one of these?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I will not take the song.
Thanks.
No, don't take the song. We'll follow you.
What's your name?
Max.
Max? What's your name?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've never heard of Unitarian till then. Messaged me this morning at like 10:30 email. I went to the Martin Luther King. I went to the Lorraine Hotel 4 years ago. They made a museum.
Like wearing.
Yeah, I was really moved by it.
Stuff like
So
that.
I have to. Yeah, no, amazing.
And I can introduce myself, I'm Joy.
Nice to meet you, Joy.
And you are?
Max.
Max, welcome, and I hope to see you again.
Yeah, no, that was like I was very I don't know what a dance church is this time.
There's one
I think I want to
big
come to
sheet
this.
up there, I think I just signed as well.
Far more informative.
Good, good.
Yeah.
We have lots of interesting.
Okay, well.
Yeah, it always happens. Always
It's amazing. People put a lot of effort. It's like, to me, it's like you have a program and like, this is like high effort in my opinion. So I have things where like, it takes a lot of work. So,
Yeah, we have a lot of.
You want to bring a mic?
yeah. Sounds
Stay for the meeting if you want. You can hear a little bit of
yeah, it's all 20 minutes. It's not a big deal.
I knew your mom.
What regularly is this building used for?
This is a senior center.
Okay.
Yeah, there are all kinds of people who rent this space.
Right.
Yeah, she was like.
Yeah. So regulars are like, you can't just come in and like use this space.
No, we have our times, we do Tuesday evenings, we have extra things on Tuesday evenings, I'm not sure what's up Tuesday.
Later.
Yeah, you should
Do you know the laughing yoga is?
Tuesdays, but it's not this week. No, it's like the 3rd Tuesday.
Tuesday is the month.
Oh, okay.
Laughing yoga, right?
That's interesting. Unfortunately, on Tuesdays I play in the Nelson Community Band.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, I was trying to like clarinet. Yeah, but I noticed that you guys have like guitar words for your songs, so if you want something to play.
Wonderful, yeah. We want to get more music.
Oh, happy.
And of course, you know, John is a musician.
Oh yeah, John plays. Yeah, he recruited me for clarinet on the street. He wants me to try and play a show with us. Okay. Yeah. Well, it gives me more impetus to practice. On my own, I don't practice that much. Oh, you gotta play a show. Yeah, that's right. Hold on, I'll help clean up.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Dan.
Nice to meet you, Max.
Every week we send a newsletter.
Oh, fabulous. Yeah, I'd love to sign. Sure, absolutely. And what's your name?
My name's Ann.
Nice to meet you.
Farrell. And Farrell
Hi, Catalina, it's me, Julie. I wonder what happened. Yeah, she's been, she's, yeah. So, it's always becoming dead.
I do. I live very close, actually. Well, a 5-minute walk.
Oh, I have a message.
Yeah, which is great. So,
And she's coming to the house.
You'll see
Yes,
that.
I know, we're having tea.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, what happened to Catalina? I'm supposed to meet her here.
Oh, you were, here.
Well, we were supposed to do lunch together.
I think
My what? Oh, I don't know. Oh, I called her already.
See you, man. Thank you for coming. I'm so glad you were here.
Oh, no, she's always here.
Yeah, no idea you were going to do anything.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to be a member, but I guess there's a bit of formality there. Okay, I usually get go for formal
Hey,
things.
Marcia, you want to stop this?
Yeah, I'm kind of like anti.
Okay.